righty, everyone. We're going to get started. Jen's mission for the day is for you all to be able to enjoy a little sunshine after today's festivities. So we're going to make her dream come true. And I would like to introduce Dwayne Clark, the general manager of Santa Fe.
So I've been told that I can only have like no more than 3 minutes.
It's 70 degrees
Or
outside.
Jennifer's going to get a hook and just pull me off of the stage. So I'm going to get started with a few remarks. So hello, good evening, and it is a nice day. I've been spending the whole day on Capitol Hill, but I no taxis. It was walking in between the buildings, and it was so nice. And as I was there, I was thinking, 41 years ago, the Orphan Drug Act was signed, and it created hope. And that hope was so important. And since 1983, so many innovations and advancements, from treatments to the science to the diagnosis, have been put into place. But it's never fast enough. It's never fast enough. And what we're here today to talk about is how do we speed that up? How do we speed that hope up? Over the past 40 years, we've needed organizations, individuals, policymakers, and so many people to add that rocket fuel to the mission that we're on. And we've been in this fight for 40 years. But 15 years ago, Every Life Foundation joined the fight, and they added rocket fuel. And they helped us come together. They unified the rare community, amplified the voices, and they made us stronger together. I spent the whole morning and afternoon up until I came here up on Capitol Hill. And 3 takeaways. And I sort of heard it in the last session. One takeaway is everybody cares, and rare diseases is on their radar screen. The second takeaway is that they need courage. They need that 20 seconds of courage to say, I'm going to endorse this. And third, what was moving them, and when they started taking notes, is when I was telling stories, the stories that you've told me. And that made a difference. And so tell your story, motivate them to sign and to support these policies that are going to bring even more hope to this community. Because the problems that we have and that we're facing, to me, are very clear. The IRA can really hurt innovation in the rare disease space. The copay accumulators, they take money out of the pocketbooks of everybody sitting in this room. The newborn screening, the intent is fabulous, and the results are outstanding. But it's so complex, and it takes so long to get there. It's still nearly 10 years on the average time to diagnosis. And I think we can do better. The Pediatric Review Voucher Program is going to end on September 24th. We don't want that to happen. The Protect Rare and MVP Act is legislation that we need. So give them the courage, tell your story, move them to take a step forward for the rare disease community, because what we're doing is winnable. And I was encouraged today by the fact that what we're doing is winnable. It's just a matter, if we unify with a common voice, that we amplify our voice and find common ground, because we are so much stronger together. It reminds me of a quote from Martin Luther King, and that is, our challenge is to live. Our challenge is to live in such a way that we help others rise above. And I think we can do that. I can do that. You can do that. We can do that together, by giving the policymakers the courage to step forward and support some of this legislation. If we come together and we find common ground, we're going to improve the lives of so many people, and magic is going to happen, and we have that ability. It's been 41 years since the Orphan Drug Care Act was passed, but we have the opportunity in 2024 to take an epic leap forward. Everybody is there. They just need a little push forward. And I have no doubt this week you're going to push. I have no doubt that you're going to push. because I'm all in, you're all in, and we're going to make a difference. And so the results are achievable. It's just that we have to take on some of the hard stuff, and we can never, ever let up. And if we do that, great things are going to happen. If we come together, we're going to fuel innovation, and we're going to accelerate the science, the treatments, the diagnosis, the access. If we come together, we're going to ensure that the savings are passed on to you. If we come together, if there's a standard of care and medically accepted treatment, access is going to be there. We need to bring together, and we have the ability to bring together the healthcare community, the industry, the advocacy organizations, the payers, to say, hey, let's work together on behalf of the rare community. But the key word there is together. And when I look across this room, it's so impressive. Everybody is here with the same mission. And it just warms my heart. And I know that we're going to give people the courage to step forward this week. I know we're going to tell our stories, and we're going to make a difference. So let this be the day. Let this be the day that is a rallying moment, because there's so many great things that can happen. Before I introduce our moderator, I'm going to end my opening remarks with what I think is a prayer that I feel is so appropriate. And the prayer is, thank you, God, for sustaining faith that takes me through this challenge. I will keep getting back up until the victory is mine. Amen. So with that, I'm gonna introduce Jennifer, who, man, I'm close. I'm like 10 seconds.
Right up there.
I am 10 seconds before she throws me off the stage. So I'd like to introduce the moderator for today, Jennifer Bernstein. Jennifer is the Executive Vice President at Horizon Affairs, where she has spent the last 15 years concentrating on legislative and regulatory issues within the biopharmaceutical landscape. She is a firm believer that those who are impacted by a rare disease are their own best advocates. Tell your story. Give people the courage to move forward. And she enjoys empowering others to find their voice in navigating the legislation and regulatory process to bring about needed change. So Jennifer, let's go.
I'm going to I'm very short. Oh my gosh. Wanted to step up here so I could see this side of the room. I want to thank everybody for being here. I know it's after 4 o'clock. You've been here all day. Some of you went through a lot to be here. Y'all brought your kids. I don't even take mine to Target, and y'all brought them to a conference. And I'm just super excited that you're all here and that you're all still awake. The plan is to walk through this and end with enough time to give you guys some of your day back so you can go and enjoy the beautiful day that we're having. So I just want to quickly mention, I've been involved with our Rare Disease Day on Capitol Hill since the very first one. And back then, we had, I want to say, maybe 75 people. And today, we have over 10 times that number, I believe. And so just to see how much this has grown warms my heart. There isn't much in DC that can warm my heart these days, but this definitely does. So thank you for being here. And I am on the board of EveryLife, but I do also want to point out that I am a parent of a child with a rare disease, so I totally get what this means and why you're here. And I hope that you take some information away from this session and use that while you're on the Hill this week. And if you have any questions about the session or anything else, feel free to contact me anytime. I'm here to help. So let me introduce our speakers. We have Amy Gaviglio. Did I say it right? I was worried I was going to say that wrong. Amy is a genetics and public health consultant, and she's going to talk to us about newborn screening initiatives. Sarah Gilbert is the Deputy Chief of Staff and Legislative Director for Congressman Neil Dunn, and she's going to be talking to us about the Protect Rare Act. And then Brian Fahey from Congressman Brett Guthrie's office is going to talk about cell and gene therapy access and the MVP Act. Each of our speakers will have a short presentation, and if there's questions, we'll take them at that time. If there's none, you guys can go outside while it's lovely. But I do want to give a super quick shout out before we start. I have met my absolute closest friends and people who have become my family from participating in this conference. I want to give a shout out to Julia and Angela and Annie and Jen Van Houten, who is somewhere in this room. Take a look at the people who are sitting around you and near you. You say hi to them because you have no idea, 15 years from now, they might be the first people who you text in the morning, who you talk to before your husband or your kids. I might do that. So I just use the opportunity not just to get on the hill and do your thing there, but use your opportunity in this room with everybody who's like-minded to make some new friends, okay? And with that, I'm turning it over to Amy.
Perfect. Thank you, Jennifer. So again, I'm Amy Gaviglio. I'm a genetic counselor by training and founder of Kinetics Consulting, which does primarily newborn screening work both at the national and international level, and that's what I'll be talking about today. And I'm really going to start with the punchline, and that is that newborn screening has the opportunity to address the diagnostic, prognostic, and therapeutic odysseys, but it is currently in crisis, and we are at a crossroads, and we are in desperate need of enhanced policies to address this system. Because newborn screening programs are administered at a public health level, and we operate under what I would call quasi-mandates, and that means that newborn screening happens by default without consent, with parents having the option to opt out. There are a number of reasons why we need policies in newborn screening. This can be for providing funding to programs so they can expand the number of diseases they're screening for, addressing issues of access. Once we detect these children, it's not that helpful if we find them and they cannot access the treatment that they need. We need policies to address data and dried blood spot storage and use, which we'll talk about a little bit more, defining what is within scope for newborn screening programs, and numerous other things. So as many of you already know, newborn screening programs are state-based, and so if you take away one thing from this talk, I want to really highlight how important the intersection of state-based policy and federal policy is for newborn screening. In general, most policies that impact newborn screening are usually set at the state level, and this can be through kind of what we might call big P policy, so legislation at the state level, but it can also be through things like a newborn screening advisory committee, a rare disease advisory council, rules or regulations or administrative codes, or even just internal procedures that a program has. But federal policies do exist around newborn screening, and I'll talk a little bit about those as well, because they certainly do impact the newborn screening system. And so the really foundational federal act that covers newborn screening is called the Newborn Screening Saves Life Act. This was passed in 2008. And what this did was really establish national newborn screening guidelines and help facilitate comprehensive newborn screening in every state by authorizing federal agencies such as HRSA, CDC, and the NIH to provide resources, technical assistance, and other needs to state newborn screening programs in order to enhance disease implementation as well as quality improvement. This act was reauthorized in 2014, and I'll talk a little bit about that on the next slide. But unfortunately, it expired on September 30th, 2019, and still has not been reauthorized. So why? Why are we still hanging out with this? So in 2014, during that reauthorization, an amendment was added to the Newborn Screening Saves Lives Act, which essentially defined the blood spots that are collected as part of newborn screening as human subjects, and this would thus require any consent for research use. Interestingly, that amendment was really only in effect until changes to the Common Rule, the so-called Common Rule, were promulgated. And the Common Rule, as they were going through their own revisions, took a look at this language that was added to the Newborn Screening Saves Lives Act and it actually came out and said, nope, we are going to nullify that definition. There is no reason to treat newborn dried blood spots any differently than any other secondary or non-identified biospecimens, and so in those ways, dried blood spots should not be considered human subjects research. You would think that would have wrapped it up in a bow and we would have been ready to go. Unfortunately, that's not the case. There is current and new and evolving resistance that are really adding challenges to blood spot use in general, the idea around consent for newborn screening and the storage and use of the dried blood spots, and this is essentially stalling reauthorization of the act right now. This is something that many of us are working on, including, of course, Every Life Foundation, as we examine potential compromises with those who are challenging the use of blood spots and consent in newborn screening, but we want to make sure that any compromise, of course, preserves the base of newborn screening, the reason why we do newborn screening, and making sure that we are always protecting our patients that we're trying to serve through our screening programs. So understanding that that federal policy is a bit stalled, and yes, we are working on it, but what else can you do? What else as advocates can you think about doing to affect newborn screening policy? And I've highlighted three kind of main areas here. So certainly there are some newborn screening specific legislation or RUSP alignment legislation. Anything that addresses rare disease access and coverage is of course going to help newborn screening programs in the infants that we find as well as therapy and drug development. In order for a disease right now to be on the newborn screening panel, we need an effective treatment, and so there's always a tie-in with therapy and drug development. You've heard and will hear about the last two a bit more, so I'll focus primarily on the newborn screening specific and RUSP alignment legislation. So one of the best ways to really get involved in newborn screening is to go to your newborn screening advisory committee meetings. Nearly every state in the US has an advisory committee. Those meetings are open to the public. They should be posted on the website. Show up, listen, get involved. There's also rare disease advisory councils. So those states that are in orange have a rare disease advisory council. These tend to be a bit more broad than newborn screening specific, but there's certainly overlap, another great opportunity to impact newborn screening in your state. So Every Life Foundation has been working on some policy around RUSP alignment. So the RUSP is the Recommended Uniform Screening Panel. This is the panel that is decided upon at the federal level for diseases that meet criteria to be added to newborn screening programs. It can take time from a RUSP addition to states actually screening, which is truly what we all want when we want a disease on the newborn screening panel. So RUSP alignment legislation works with states to identify the barriers and gaps to more efficient addition of newborn screening diseases, and codifies language that tries to address those barriers and sets time bounds on how long a state can take to actually add a disease. So this is another great opportunity if you feel like your state needs help, has barriers that are getting in the way of adding diseases. This is another great opportunity for state-based legislation. One thing I want to really quickly point out as you think about in helping out with legislation at the state level is how important funding is. I cannot tell you how often we see unfunded mandates as it pertains to newborn screening, and those are very difficult for programs to work with. Newborn screening programs, just like our public health system, is woefully under-resourced, and so trying to add new diseases with current funding is usually a non-starter. So as you're thinking about legislation, as you're working on legislation, please work with your programs to understand what the funding needs are to actually implement what you're trying to do. And I think sometimes when we think about newborn screening and you hear about funding needs for newborn screening, it's always focused on the cost of the test. It only costs 10 cents to screen for this newborn. And while that might be true, that is not the entire system. Yes, we could maybe screen for these infants for 10 cents, but then what? Do we have education materials? Do we have specialists? Do we have the coverage to make sure that they're getting to the right place at the right time in an effective and efficient manner? So really thinking about totality of cost to the newborn screening system, which can include facility infrastructure, equipment upgrades, follow-up staff to make sure that we are following these infants and they're getting where they need, and education and training activities, not only for staff, but primary care providers as well. So understanding again that the reauth was stalled for a bit, one of the things that we were able to get out of some work on the newborn screening reauthorization was a National Academies of Science and Engineering and Medicine project, which is working to assess the current newborn screening system and figure out where modernization needs are happening. This is another great opportunity for you all to get involved at the really more of the federal level for newborn screening. So the goal of the NASEM study is to develop a report which will provide more short-term options to strengthen the existing newborn screening program, but also think more long-term in terms of what needs to happen over the next 5 to 15 years to build a sustainable model for newborn screening in the future. So the committee will plan to conduct robust engagement efforts to gain perspectives from individuals. All of you have great perspectives to add to this. There will be listening sessions, likely opportunities for written comment or surveys. And so please look at this web link here if you're interested. Sign up for email updates. I think this is going to be a really great opportunity, not only for those of you already involved in newborn screening, but those who would like to get involved in newborn screening to stay abreast of what's going on and have an impact on the potential future of the newborn screening system. So I'll end quickly with the idea. I think one of the beautiful as well as frustrating things about newborn screening is it really is this integration of people, science, and policy, and we're going to continue to see that as newborn screening programs evolve. Again, there are many policies that affect newborn screening system at the local, state, and federal level. Really would be helpful if we had a reauthorization, because these could address many of the needs that I've already mentioned, things like modernization, expansion of diseases, quality improvement, data sharing. Those are all things that could be addressed with an improved reauth. And again, as we think about policies affecting the newborn screening system, don't just focus on those that have the words newborn screening in them, but think about those that also address things like education, consent, access, therapy development, etc. So with that, I will pass it to Sarah.
Thank you. How do I turn this on? Hello? Oh, perfect. Hi, Sarah Gilbert here from the Office of Congressman Neil Dunn, who is from Florida. My boss sits on the Energy and Commerce Committee, which is one of the committees in the House with jurisdiction over many aspects of our healthcare system. As y'all head out tomorrow and throughout the week to chat with your elected representatives, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to talk to you guys about a piece of legislation that is important to my boss. The bill is called the Protect Rare Act, and this bill aims to provide coverage for medications that have shown to be effective in the treatment and management of rare diseases, but may not have that indication listed on their label. So in practice, the bill provides for Medicare and Medicare coverage for a medication if there is peer-reviewed medical literature indicating its efficacy, as well as clinical guidelines that indicate it is efficacious in the treatment of or management of a disease, a rare disease, pardon. And then in the private insurer space, which I'm sure a lot of you have faced challenges with, it requires those companies to create a mechanism within their plan design whereby a patient can request either formulary exception or appeal or redetermination of a reconsideration of a denial. The panel before this, I know, focused on step therapy. I think everyone's very familiar here. My boss, who's also a physician, refers to step therapy as fail first. What kind of way to practice medicine is that? That's what we would say. We know that the doctor-patient relationship is sacred. It's of the utmost importance when you step into the doctor's office. And we think that this bill is an effort to ensure that those conversations, informed by sound medical research, can be made between a patient and a doctor. And, to that end, I wanted to talk a little bit about why, sometimes we have these efficacious treatments, but they're not necessarily, the label doesn't indicate so for a certain disease. When you have a manufacturer exploring a new treatment for a rare disease, it may make more sense in their seeking of approval to, for example, test the treatment in a small subset of a rare disease group. They achieve the high bar of FDA approval for that subset of patients, and that's what goes on the label. Then, as we know, our research institutions, academic institutions continue to do research, continue to conduct clinical trial, and often find that there are a broader group of patients within that disease that may benefit from the treatment. That manufacturer does not always go back to FDA and have that added to the label. If this bill were passed, that array of research that has demonstrated efficacy would be the bar of acceptable standard for coverage. So we think that is very important. And I think, as you are speaking with members of Congress throughout the week, you may have encountered situations where a treatment that you or a loved one was interested in met this criteria. I encourage you to share those stories. I would also, make the distinction that this is not a opening of the floodgates, so to speak, for access to experimental therapies. The language used in the bill is very carefully chosen to mirror language in other areas of statute where we do have medically accepted use. And we hope that you can have some great conversations with legislators during the course of the week about this bill. And I'll stop there.
Could you mention the name of the bill one more time?
Yes, it is H.R. 6094, the Protect Rare Act.
Thank you, everyone, for letting us come and speak to you all today. I know I know these days are probably very long and stressful, especially if you're traveling with family members. So appreciate it. I was just doing some research. Well, first of all, my name is Brian Fahey. I work for Congressman Brett Guthrie. He's the chair of the Energy and Commerce Health Subcommittee, which has jurisdiction over the FDA, CMS, Medicare, Medicaid, and commercial markets in some cases. So, but as we've been hearing on Thursday on rare diseases, it's a big deal. It's one of the first hearings dedicated specifically to rare diseases from as long as I can remember, and I read something that I guess it was in 2002, between 1983 and 1999, the Orphan Drug Act was attributed to preventing 108,000 deaths across the country because of the incentives included in the statute to help spur development of rare disease drugs. That's amazing, and I think that's a testament to the work that you all have done over the course of history to try to make sure that your loved ones, either yourself or your loved ones, have a seat at the table. My boss, Congressman Guthrie, he was a state legislator for about 10 years before coming to Congress, and he also has a manufacturing background, but he really understood the challenges of trying to balance a budget and needing to provide access to critical health care for vulnerable patient populations on Medicaid specifically, which obviously is not easy. Medicaid programs can be costly to state budgets, and so he really got interested in trying to find creative solutions to provide access to care for Medicaid beneficiaries. And fast forwarding to, I guess it was 2017 when one of the first cell and gene therapies was approved. I think it was Spark Therapeutics, and then I know Novartis had a drug approved around that same timeline. But there was a real desire and need, I think urgent need, to try to find a creative way to provide access to these drugs, especially for Medicaid patients. The current statute, the Medicaid Drug Rebate Program, I'm sure that's exactly what people want to hear about at 4:30 on a Monday, but it's very wonky. And basically, if you're a pharmaceutical manufacturer, you have this isn't, this isn't as simple as I'm going to explain it, and forgive me, but basically, you can either provide your drug to a Medicaid program, and there's an open formulary, so every patient will have access in that state. But in order to do so, you have to do it at a pretty significant discount. So it's whatever the cheapest price that the drug is sold for in the commercial markets, minus 23% if you're a branded drug. And for some of these groundbreaking cell and gene therapies that cost billions of dollars to bring to market, that's just a really tough deal for the manufacturers, and it's even worse, more importantly, for patients. So the Trump administration put together a rule in the Medicaid program to amend the best price statute and basically allow for manufacturers to submit two best prices. One, what they think the price would be with a 23% discount, and another price for an outcomes-based arrangement, value-based arrangement. So in theory, the state Medicaid program could be paying more for a drug, but if a patient responds to the drug and it's curative, I think sickle cell is a great example. We've had 2 sickle cell drugs, gene therapies approved in the same day in December, which is amazing. In that case, you can cure someone's sickle cell, and let's say I'm making these numbers up, so again, forgive me, but if you're spending $1 million a year on maintenance medications for a Medicaid patient, and the drug is $3.8 million, I think is what one of the list prices were for one of the drugs approved in December. You're going to pay for that. You're going to pay for that in 3 years, 4 years, but more importantly, the patient has a tremendously better quality of life. In order, so you're paying as a state Medicaid program potentially more than you would pay for a drug typically, but you're improving someone's quality of life. And in addition to that, you're saving money in the long run. And obviously that patient can go on, to live a healthy life and be a productive member of society. And then on the flip side of that, if a patient doesn't respond to it, you're not on the hook paying for the drug. And so, there's some incentive there for the manufacturers to make sure that they're really meeting the needs of patients. There were a couple problems with that rule. Number one, it didn't address Stark law reform. So if you're anti-kickback law, so if you're providing a drug to a patient and you're potentially paying a state Medicaid program back if the drug doesn't work, that would be a kickback. Or if you're getting more for the drug, then that would be a kickback as well, in either direction. So what the MVP Act would do, it's a huge priority for Congressman Guthrie. It would codify the rule, and by the way, it's a bipartisan rule. It was initially proposed under President Trump and then continued under the Biden administration. So we would codify the rule in addition to clarifying, making some technical clarifications to again make it much easier to engage in value-based contracting. So I think just some examples, one real-world example. CSL Behring had a drug that was approved in November of 2022, I think it was, to treat hemophilia B. It's about $850,000 a year to treat someone with hemophilia B. Well, their drug is a curative. Actually, I think it's 2 doses, but curative. And it was priced at about $2.8 million. I almost said billion. $2.8 million. So, if you want to pay if you're a state Medicaid program, you want to pay for the drug up front, you can do that if you have it in the budget. And if you want to pay over time, you can do that too. And again, you're gonna assuming that the patient responds to the drug and it works, you're gonna save money in the long run and provide a tremendously better quality of life for someone. So that's and then just how you can measure one final thing on the MVP Act and some of the outcomes-based arrangements. I think a good example of this is for the Spark Therapeutics drug, which helps cure blindness in young kids. One way you can measure success is you do vision tests, every few months, every month, every couple months, every year over time. And if the patient's vision continues to improve, the drug clearly is working, and the manufacturer wouldn't be on the hook for that, and hopefully the patient wouldn't be hospitalized or taking more trips to the hospital. So that's just one example of how you can kind of structure the outcomes-based arrangements. So that's the MVP Act, and we would welcome all support. Every Life has already been fantastic, so thank you so much. And yeah, I'll leave it there.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I don't know how to use microphones apparently. Does anybody have any questions for any of our speakers? I love it. I do too.
Okay, since it's an emerging policy, what's the next process? We're supposed to get a whole bunch of co-sponsors and stuff, and then becomes bill or what?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. We would love y'all's assistance with that step of the process. The hearing on Thursday in the Energy and Commerce Committee that my colleague Brian referenced will feature this bill as we have a list of legislation in the rare disease space. This is one of them, so it's a good opportunity while the bill is already on the minds of particularly members of the Energy and Commerce Committee to chat with them about garnering their support. Thank you.
So you called it emerging policy, which it is in the rare disease community, but it's something that's been around for quite some time in the oncology field. So it's built off of legislation that's been very successfully used in oncology. So that's another plus for us.
I know him. Are you going to stomp anybody?
No, I'm not. It's a softball for everybody, and it could be maybe a generic question, but what kind of resistance could advocates encounter on the Hill if they're going and talking to members about any of these items? So what could they be prepared to go into?
I can start. I think a lot of our elected officials take their responsibility to be fiscally responsible very seriously, especially when we talk about our public health programs such as Medicare and Medicaid. So I think that cost is always a question you're going to get with respect to the Protect Rare Act. We have taken care and evolved the legislation over Congress's to tighten the criteria that will provide for coverage to ensure that we are good stewards of taxpayer dollars. I will also, just another plug for my boss's bill, the types of treatments that may be covered under the bill, we had a constituent who her insurer was pushing her towards a $100,000 a month infusion, whereas what she was seeking coverage for, which was more appropriate for her condition, was a $1,000 a month infusion. So this is not necessarily always going to lead to a more expensive course of treatment.
Yeah, and then on, thank you for the question. I think it's an important question. On MVP, the pushback that we got, so that actually just the process, from process standpoint, the MVP Act actually already was marked up out of the Energy and Commerce committee, full committee. So it awaits floor action, and we're trying to build co-sponsors. So again, welcome anyone's support for that. But the one pushback that we got on MVP was that it's a handout to pharmaceutical manufacturers, and it's going to lead to all sorts of gaming, and drug prices would go up. But that's just not true. The bill actually requires manufacturers to submit two prices. One, what the value-based contracted rate would be, and then the other, an estimate of what the discounted rate would be. So, and the states obviously don't have to choose the value-based contract; they can choose the cheaper rate, and the manufacturers again would either be left with the choice of providing the drug at the discounted rate or not providing the drug. And I think hopefully they would. So that's the one pushback for MVP. But we have over 30 bipartisan co-sponsors. So hopefully those arguments are not landing.
I'll flag one other. There may be pushback that we are, or others, not me, but aren't trying to lower the bar for safety or efficacy. And I hate that argument because no one's trying to pour unsafe medicine down people's throats. So feel free to push back against that, because I think that's an argument that's used that really gets in the way of some progress.
In regards to the Protect Rare Act, I currently receive an infusion and I'm on private insurance, but I will be going on Medicare and Medicaid. And the infusion is only covered for one diagnosis, which I don't have. So until that act is hopefully passed, are there steps that can be taken to get coverage for the infusion? Because it's $15,000 per infusion and I get it up 2 to 3 times a month.
Thank you. And I wish I could better answer your question. Under the Medicaid and Medicare programs, I'm not aware of steps you can take to request exception to coverage. I know that individual manufacturers at times take steps to work with individual patients. And I think, advocacy hand in hand with your physician can be effective as well, but would be happy to follow up, or I'm sure there may be folks in this room or that we are connected with that have, not ideas, but knowledge of those sorts of pathways.
What state are you in? Okay. Other questions? Ooh.
Thank you so much. I just wanted the opportunity to say thank you and just put a little plug in for why I'm here, especially in addition to supporting all the asks of RDLA, and that's the Medical Nutrition Equity Act, which was reintroduced this session by Congressman Rutherford and McGovern. And we're hoping that Energy and Commerce, the Health Committee will hear it this year. We have CMSTA already under our belts. We have hopefully the CBO coming up, but it's just, you mentioned before about the newborn screening and problems with access, and PKU and other genetic disorders are kind of a poster child for newborn screening in terms of we're picked up at birth and we have a treatment, but yet we can't access it. So I just wanted this opportunity to say thank you for everything you do. And for your bosses supporting rare disease, and we hope to see you in Energy and Commerce this session.
Can you mention your bill one more time?
Sure, it's the Medical Nutrition Equity Act, and it's 6892, and we're hoping it'll be introduced in the Senate soon as well. But we do have Congressman Rutherford and McGovern are the leads on the House side.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for mentioning that act, because I believe so wholeheartedly in that it is unacceptable that we have been screening for that disease now for 60 plus years and our patients still cannot access their treatment. I think if we can, if you want to talk about that particular bill, one thing that I think we need to say is if we are going to say it is so important for us to screen for this disease that we are going to mandate that it happen, then we best have the responsibility and the accountability to make sure that those families have access to their treatments. So thank you.
One pagers on that bill, for those who didn't hear that, are on the table in the lobby area out there. Okay, I think it's time for you guys to leave. I just got the hook. Go outside, enjoy this day. Good luck tomorrow and for the rest of the week. And if you guys have any questions, we'll probably be floating around for a little bit. And we're not actually finished. Don't get up yet.
We're so close, I promise. We're so close.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, I'm going to give you guys just a couple closing remarks / reminders. Please be sure to check your email on Friday. We will have a survey for you guys to fill out and tell us all of your feedback, good and bad, for this week. So please fill that out. Hopefully no bad though.
Session was y'all's favorite.
Exactly, exactly. And we will take all of the names of those who fill it out and choose one to win a travel reimbursement to attend Rare Disease Week next week. Next week, not next week, next year. It's a really long day, okay? This week on the schedule here, we are gonna have a YAR meetup when this wraps up, and we're also gonna have a meetup for the RDLA Advisory Committee. So if you fall into either of those groups, please join us after this. Tomorrow, of course, we have our Hill meetings. We have a full day of events on the Hill on Wednesday, starting with the DEI discussions, followed by the caucus briefing, and then the Rare Artist reception. Breakfast and lunch will be served tomorrow, so be sure to join us. And as mentioned, across the hall in Ballroom B, we have the young adult meetup starting at 5. If you are a young adult ages 16 to 30, I highly encourage you to attend this. The R group is phenomenal, so you have to go hang out with them if you are in the age range. And then, of course, our Hill Day tomorrow. Wear your red scarves that you got in your bag today, especially for our group photo. Again, the closest metro stops are Union Station on the Senate side and then Capitol South on the House side. Maps of both Capitol Hill and the DC Metro are in your program booklet, so be sure to check that out, especially if you're planning to take the Metro. You can also use the Google Maps or Maps app on your phone to navigate the Metro, so that's always a great resource. And keep in mind, if you are going to Metro, it is about a 15-minute walk from either Metro to the House or Senate office buildings. Our DEIA discussions tomorrow are going to kick off at 10 a.m. Breakfast will be served right before that at 9:30, and we will wrap up at noon. This is going to be in the Cannon House office building, room 390. The overall theme of the discussions are going to be around access and spending inequities in healthcare and treatment development. We're going to cover key achievements that have happened so far and then possibilities for achievements moving forward. And then, of course, we have our Rare Disease Congressional Caucus briefing that will start at 1 o'clock. Between the two events, we will have lunch for you all. This caucus briefing is titled The Rare Disease Community in Congress, Changing the Status Quo. So we are going to have phenomenal speakers that join us to talk about each of the policies we've discussed today. They're going to talk about their experience either as an expert in their disease space or as a patient representative. So highly encourage you to join us for this. And then, of course, we will take our group photo on the Capitol steps on our way over to the Rare Artist reception at 3 o'clock. So again, wear your red scarves. If you are not joining us for the DEIA discussions or caucus briefing, you can still come join us for the group photo. We are going to be on the side of the Capitol that faces the Supreme Court building, not the side that faces the mall. And then, of course, the Rare Artist reception is going to be our last event tomorrow. It is going to be on the House side. Oh my gosh, guys, I don't know what day or week it is anymore. I'm sorry. I'm not used to waking up this early. Wednesday, not tomorrow. Our last event, Wednesday. Thank you, Shannon. It is going to be in the Russell Senate office building, room 325, from 3:45 to 5:45. So we hope to see you guys there. And thank you so much for joining us today. We know today is a long day, but I hope that you've learned a lot and that you've made some good connections. So thank you all for being here, and thank you to all of our speakers for joining us.